Cinema. The act of going into a dark room and falling into a world that's not your own. Now, this picture, Twilight, has some of my favorite parts of a film. Story. It's got one. Characters, you better believe it, Buster. And abstractions. Now, abstractions are things that can only be expressed through the language of cinema. Things that are fantastical things that don't exist in our real world, like things like a dad that can pull off a mustache, full of grown adults in AP Bio class, and of course vampires. Now, this picture, Twilight, it's one of my favorite kinds of stories. It's a story about a girl in trouble in the Pacific Northwest. My kind of deal. So if you don't know the story, it would be crazy, because why would you come here? But I'm going to tell it to you anyhow. So basically, the way this story starts is this new girl, she's new in town, and she gets into a world of trouble because she meets this fella, and this fella, he's so weird. He's a weird guy, and the reason he's a weird guy is it turns out that he's a vampire. And so it makes sense that he'd be weird, because he's so old. How old is he? He's so old he should be dead twice. Now, it also makes sense that the strangeness is so deep because, he got turned into a vampire when he was, 16 or something. And so his frontal cortex never fully formed. And so he's flipping around and going, I've never seen such a twerked up white boy in my life, and I directed Kyle MacLachlan on Dune. But anyway, he's flicking around all over the place like frogs in the night, and he's, acting on instinct and hormones, and probably smells vaguely of Code Red Mountain Dew, despite only drinking blood. But what is blood if not the code red of the body? In any event, there's also this other fella, and he's the kind of guy that you think you know on Monday, but by Thursday he's somebody else, Because, once a month he goes loony and he turns into a wolf. And I knew a guy like that growing up. We called him Weird Dave, which is also what the kids called me. And you'd think it would be confusing, but it wasn't, because you've got to remember one of us was 12. Anyhow, so Weird Dave, once a month he'd get drunk as a skunk, and then we'd all hear about it later. In any event, the next part of the story is a gang of vampires, we'll call them the Code Reds. A gang of vampires, they show up and they try to eat the girl to prove a point. And who among us hasn't tried to do that? And then something happens and the day is saved. And I'm going to be honest with you folks, I've only seen this movie once a week for the last 10 years, because I can't, make heads or tails of this thing, and it's such a strange picture, and I called up Catherine Hardwicke, who directed the film, and I said, Catherine, what's going on? And I don't understand this. And she said, Dave, maybe you don't need to understand the feelings of a teenage girl. And I said, but I keep trying. And she said, don't worry about it, but if you like this picture, you might like another one of mine. It's called Lords of Dogtown. And it's very similar, except for instead of vampires, there's skateboards. And instead of girls, there's boys. And I said, Catherine, why would I want to look at a boy when I could look at a girl? So I'm so glad this is speaking to you. In any event, my time's almost up, but before I go, I'd love to talk to you for a moment about transcendental meditation. Now,